Hey Neppers, it's me, Wild Neptune. Welcome to the last card review for the mini set, Dr. Boom's Incredible Inventions. Let's get started right here with Death Knight. The first card, 3 mana, 1 Plague Rune, 2/1 Undead, Toy Snatching Geist, Gigantify, which again means play this card, get another version, which is 8 mana, 8/8 to your hand, with a battle cry, discover an undead, reduce its cost by this minion's attack. So this has 2 attack, so let's say you play this as it is, you'll reduce whatever minion you discover by 2 mana, which is pretty nice. Of course, when you play the 8/8 version, you reduce the cost of that by the 8 attack. Now of course, Death Knight has gotten a hand buff package, which is almost there in standard. It is, I would say, right now, just a little bit below the power level required to be a real deck, but I don't know, maybe this will make it a real deck. Now, it's worth noting that a random undead being reduced in cost is a lot worse than a one just in your hand that you have in your deck. And the 2 reduction on the first one isn't that great. Yeah, you can probably hand buff it a little bit, although that means that takes a little bit longer to get going. And on top of that, this body itself doesn't really do anything, right? So you're already kind of paying a tax, because this is a 3 mana 2/1, and those stats are just really bad. So this is almost a one, like not even a 1 cost minion, right? This is like a 0.5 mana. So for this first one, I feel to really get like stat value, you have to at least buff this by 1 attack in order to get the next one, basically this for free, before this becomes good to play as it is. Now the 8/8 version, you do discover a card and reduce that one by 8 mana. The problem is that one you're paying 8 mana up front for, again, another card that doesn't really do anything. And you are hoping that you get a good hit from your discover, and sometimes you just don't, right? Sometimes you might have like Hail Mary for a taunt, or for like Gnome Muncher, I think is undead, or something like that, or that rush that hits that cleaves, and sometimes you don't get it, right? Or sometimes you do and you're really happy because you just won the game on RNG. But that doesn't usually work a lot of the times right now, at least in standard and constructed. So I don't know, this card looks decent. Again, for hand buff, it could be okay, but I feel like this is a card that is more win more overall. Because of that, I'm actually also there's also the undead pool, right? Right now the undead pool is not that bad actually, especially in Death Knight, because you can discover a lot of the hand buff undeads too, and kind of snowball that way. And because of that, I'll bump this to a 3 out of 5. Sort of a tepid one, because I'm not really that high in this card, but it is worth a look. Maybe, again, it'll give hand buff a little bit more life in Death Knight. Helm of Humiliation. 4 mana, 2 blood runes, give a minion -5/-5, give a minion in your hand +5/+5. So it's both basically a removal, as this will kill any minion with 5 or less health, and render any minion with 5 or less attack basically useless for the most part, and also buff a minion in your hand for 4 mana, which is, for Death Knight, a class that doesn't really have a lot of hard removal, not that bad for 4 mana, especially since it synergizes with other things they want to do, like hand buffing and stuff like that. Now, one of the major problems with this card isn't the effect, which I actually think is not that bad for the cost, but the 2 blood runes. And in my opinion, its 2 blood runes is what makes this card basically unplayable. in all formats. If this was like one blood, one other rune, two other different types of runes, maybe be okay. One of the runes would have to be Plague, I believe, for the hand buffing thing. But you can't play this in Rainbow. Blood has not really had any support for a very long time, and until Blood Death Knight gets more support, this isn't going to be a thing that people play. 1 out of 5. Foam Render, 5 mana, 1 Plague Rune. I keep saying Plague Rune. It's Unholy Rune. But yeah, you know. Whenever your hero attacks, spend 3 corpses to gain +1 durability. So this is a decent corpse spender for your climatic necrotic explosion, or whatever it's called, to burst down. As right now, the big corpse spenders in the game are like Corpse Bride, the Rush Ghoul thing, the 5 mana, spend some of the 2/2s, that one, and stuff like that. And also Ma and Pa, right? Which is one of the best generators / spenders, like, for overall tempo in the game. Now, this is itself probably a pretty good card, like in a vacuum. So first, let's talk about Wild first. In Wild, I don't know. It probably doesn't see play, right? Death Knight is not a strong class in Wild. And when it is played, it is even Death Knight, because getting the 1 mana hero power in Death Knight is a lot better than getting, say, like, you know, anything else. And because this is a 5 mana card, it can't be played in even Death Knight. If this was like a 4 mana 4/1 instead, I would say this is like potentially a 4 out of 5, 5 out of 5 card. But because it's a 5 mana 5/1, and also I think people underestimate how difficult it might be to consistently get 3 corpses every time you have this, because there'll be a lot of times, I feel, in the game where you just can't swing this without breaking the weapon itself. And this, like, that dance game, right, between whether or not you want to maintain the value of the weapon or just swing for the damage. And a lot of times too, you might just want to spend your 10 corpses on Corpse Bride or something like that, right, instead of using the weapon. So I think this is good, right? It's only 1 rune, which definitely increases flexibility, but I don't think it's like an insane card, but it's a good card. 4 out of 5. Let's move on to Warlock. Mass Production. 1 mana, draw 2 cards, deal 3 damage to your hero, shuffle 2 copies of this into your deck. First of all, I really like this artwork, right? They're like Nemsy Funko Pops or whatever. But, okay, first off, out of the way. Draw 2 cards for the measly cost of 1 mana and 3 damage to your hero is insane. Anybody would take this any class, every day, every day. Now, you shuffle 2 copies into your deck, which makes it more interesting. Let's go to Wild first, because that's more interesting, since there's a deck in Wild called Demon Seed Warlock. Probably heard about it. Nowhere near as strong as it probably was back in the day when it was like everywhere. From what I hear, now again, I did not play during that time, but I've heard stories. The deck is still strong enough to be played right now. Is it like a great deck in Wild? No, but it is strong enough to be playable. Now, normally that deck kills you a lot of the times by getting to fatigue and killing you with their fatigue damage. Now with this card, you never actually fatigue. Instead, you get to like the bottom of your deck, you play this card, like one that you saved up, and then you just spam this, like probably a 10 mana at that point, for 30 damage from hand, right? Because you just draw this, you play this, you can shove more and more into your deck, and that's how you win eventually. Now, one of the problems here too is that for the initial quest line, this card is actually pretty inefficient. Warlock actually has a lot of ways to deal damage to themselves in Wild that are really good. Some of them actually give them minions on the board, like they'll clear the board, right? Just have survival overall. And even though this gets you resources, right? It gets you cards, right? It does increase your quest line progress. It doesn't actually affect the board at all, which is kind of dangerous, even at the cost of 1 mana, right? Every mana counts in Wild. On top of that, I don't feel like, even though the 30 damage from hand at the end of the game is probably more damage overall than what the initial burst from a Deep-Seed Warlock right now can do to you on the first turn, from experience and playing against the deck, when Deep-Seed Warlock gets to their end game, if you're a deck that is not going to kill them or like be killed by the Warlock, you know, that turn, initial turn, you probably can't kill the Warlock the next turn either, right? Just by the nature of you're probably a slower deck, maybe like a control deck, like a Reno deck, something like that, and you probably don't have the resources to actually burst on the Warlock at that point. Now, if you are a faster deck, like an aggro deck, something like that, you probably already taken enough damage at that point from the Warlock where, you know, whether you take 30 damage or like 15 damage, that doesn't really matter either. So I actually don't think this makes the cut in Deep-Seed Warlock. As broken as this seems to be, I actually think that this will be tested and cut in that deck. Now, in Standard. Right now in Standard, there are actually a number of Warlock decks in the format. Snake, Insanity, and Pain, right? Let's get Snake and Insanity out of the way. This card probably doesn't make it into those decks probably. Really no synergy with those decks. Now, but Pain Warlock is more interesting because they like doing damage to themselves, and unlike Insanity Warlock, it's also Sludge Warlock too, actually. So even more Warlocks, a lot of Warlock decks, right? But this is Pain Warlock is the one that would probably play this card, and I feel like that deck doesn't care about the downside of this. It like basically dilutes, like makes your deck worse by shuffling copies into into the deck, because in that case, I feel like that deck in particular is okay with paying a small bit of a tax where they use this card early on to get resources sooner, right? And then if they have to draw this like later into the game, it's like, okay, right? Like I just paid kind of a delayed cost when I draw this the next time around. Maybe that cost isn't so bad where it's also be played in other decks too, but in Pain Warlock, since it specifically synergizes with that strategy, I think it's a lot better in that one. So yes, like as an individual power level of a card, this is probably like a 4 to 5 card, but because I think the downside does kind of limit this a little bit, I'm actually only going to give this a 3 out of 5. Domino Effect. 3 mana. Deal 2 damage to a minion. Repeat to the left or right, dealing 1 more damage each time. So this is like that mage card, right? Whatever it's called, I don't remember, way back in the day. I believe, so it's like, it's random, right? Let's say you target a minion in the middle, it will always like randomly pick. And I think if you pick like the leftmost minion, it will always go to the right, and pick the rightmost minion, it will always go to the left. At least I hope that's how it happens, right? If it doesn't happen like that, this card sucks, right? But if it does happen like that, this card is actually a lot better. Now, 3 mana is actually pretty good. Now also, even though Warlock does have a lot of good removal, like Defile, it has Table Flip, it has that that Arcane Missiles type whatever thing, that life steals, it can use more, right? A lot of Warlock's like non-aggressive strategies doesn't really drop minions early into the game, and just having some more removal is pretty nice. this one too is actually, it's really, really, really good, specifically against token strategies. And one of the bonuses here is that you don't have to have a full hand to play this for 3 mana. It's just 3 mana. And there's not really other cost either. So yeah, this is one of those cards too that it will definitely also make people think about their monster positioning too, which is, you know, I think a good thing, right? Make the other player like think about other things also. Yes, I think this is a great card, right? That we'll see play in a lot of Warlock decks, at least in Standard. In Wild, probably isn't good enough to make the cut right now, but we'll have to see about that. But this is a good card, 4 out of 5. And now we have Infernal, 4 mana, 6/6 taunt, but the battle cry set a hero's remaining health to 15. So remaining does mean you'll be able to heal it back up if you have any lifesteal or healing, stuff like that. Now, out of the way here, the only, again, Warlock deck I feel this is seen playing would be Pain Warlock. As a lot of the times, you're already at 15 health anyway at turn 4, so just drop this anyway, really no negative effects. Now, since it is set your health to 15, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it does not affect like things where reduce the cost of this card by the amount of damage you took, right? It will reduce the cost of things like Molten Giant, of course, because that's based on your actual HP. But for things like, I forget the name of the card, right? But you're the one where it costs like 1 less for each damage you took. You know, this game, like, this will not actually reduce that one, so you won't be able to drop this and then that other card for free. Now, with how aggressive some decks are right now, like, even other, like, Warlock decks sometimes are at 15 health, right, at turn 4 anyway. But for that, I don't feel like the synergy is there enough, or they can, like, those decks want to do other things, right? Like Sludge Warlock wants to drop their Waste Remover around that time. Like Snake Warlock wants to drop their Excavate Taunt card and stuff. Insanity wants to do other things also. So again, because of the synergy and how it works, specifically for Pain Warlock, I think that's where this card sees a home. Now the question is this card good enough to see a home in Pain Warlock overall? Probably. I would say yes, right? Again, because in Pain Warlock, not really a downside. Like, this battle cry doesn't really hurt the deck that much. And the taunt too, even if you lose a little bit of health by playing this, the taunt probably mitigates that also. So I'm going to give this card a 4 out of 5. Probably not playable in Wild. Alright, and those are all the cards from Whizbang's Workshops mini set, Dr. Boom's Incredible Inventions. Hope you enjoy this. Do you agree? Do you disagree with any of the ratings? Tell me down in the comments below. Of course, if you like this, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. All that good stuff. Very excited for the mini set to shake up this meta, which has gotten a little bit stale. Hopefully, too, some battleground changes as Crowbores are running rampant everywhere. Anyway, I'm Wild Neptune. It's been a good one. Nep out.